The Financial Survival Network, helping you survive and thrive in the new economy. Go to CarrieLutz.com and sign up for 30 free micro trainings on financial survival.
$14.90 WGCH. This is Carrie Lutz. You're listening to the Financial Survival Network. If you're wondering, is QE going to infinity? Is China going to own all of the world's debt? How high can the U.S. budget deficit go? My next guest, regular on the show, Ty Andros. He's got the answers to this and much more. Ty, how you doing?
Good. How are you today?
Hey, we're doing good. It's Friday. It's February 17th. The week is almost over. Got one more interview, and I'm tired. But you can never get tired of all this news that's coming in the global financial meltdown, can you?
No, it's a never-ending maelstrom.
Yeah, and looks like right now we're getting ready for another jolt of quantitative easing, or as the regular folks call it, money printing. And what's your take on that?
Well, we've had two new injections since the last time we spoke. 50 billion gilt or British pounds, which is about $75 billion. And then we've also had Japan chime in with another 130 billion of announced QE. And, both of those governments, British is the British running at, an 8 or 9% compounded annually deficit, and they're monetizing virtually all of it. We've got the Japanese, who virtually have to roll all of their debt, or not all of it, half of their debt this year. And, since debt to GDP there is over 200%, that means they have to virtually print a full year's worth of GDP. So
there's no end to this, is there?
No, not well. There will be an end to it, but it's when people realize that the paper's printed endlessly and they reject the paper. But we're, I think, actually pretty far away from that still.
Yeah, when you keep saying we're far away, how far is far away?
Well, we've got a wild card. It could be 2 years. It could be 6 or 7. I had problems with debt and money printing back in 1987, so you can see how far off you can be. Mm-hmm. And we're seeing the angle of ascent of the debasement of the dollar is just breathtaking. And, I believe the dollar will be the last to fall. Everything is a derivative of the dollar. But truth be known, the United States is no worse than Greece. I was reading some work this week that showed how they're falsifying GDP in this country by almost $2 trillion, which is about 12 or 13% of reported GDP, and how they're using hedonics and imputed rents to, I'll call it, smoke the numbers up. And imputed rents, I'll just give you an overview. What they do, Carrie, is they look at homes that are paid for, and they say, okay, that home was being rented out. You could get $1,800 a month for it. Obviously, it's owner-occupied. But they call that, even though nobody rented it and there was no transaction involved, $1,800 worth of GDP. Mm-hmm. And then you multiply that by the tens of millions of homes that are fully paid for, and you get some kind of an idea of how this is, changing the debt numbers, the GDP numbers. But to think about it is what it does as well is changes all the debt to GDP numbers. Mm-hmm. And it's just a frightening turn of events. The events were frightening enough in the forms that we could see. But when you really think about this and you look at it based upon 10 years, it really puts the United States in quite a bit worse situation.
Yeah, well, the GDP is a flawed measure to start with because it doesn't measure wealth creation. It measures consumption. It doesn't measure production. And very phony types of activity like Bernie Madoff can have the effect of increasing GDP when, in effect, the real economy is shrinking, right?
The real economy is shrinking at a compound annual rate of, near as I can tell, 8% compounded annually. And you add that to, our GDP, our debt per year, which is about, 8 or 9%. It's a frightening gap. And of course, debt can't be paid unless there's income. So if there's no income, where do you get the money?
Print it up.
That's why it's called inflate or die. Yeah. And of course, we're going to see the European Central Bank again at the end of next week, or actually the beginning of the following week. Like I said, they're going to print up another $1 trillion. We've got the debt limit going up here in the United States by $1.3 trillion. We just added 10% to this year's deficit just yesterday, where they approved the 2% Social Security tax break and added new unemployment insurance extensions worth another $150 billion. And I'm actually delighted about it because it's now going to be an issue front and center. They had hoped to kick that can till after the election and ignore it. No, it's going to be right on the front screen radar in July or August.
Hey, well, they'll just cut a backroom deal and get that thing out of the way because it's the crazy uncle or aunt locked up in the attic that nobody wants to deal with, and they just leave it there and hope that the next generation will get to deal with it. But then we look at gold. I've noticed an alarming pattern the past couple of weeks where gold will get bid up in Europe, in Asia, in the evening hours, U.S. time, and then the market opens here and it's beat down, sometimes for a loss, sometimes for break even, or sometimes for a minor gain. Have you been noticing that pattern, Ty?
Actually, that pattern's been going on for years now. And if you had been buying gold at the close and selling it on the open, you would have thousands of percent return rather than hundreds.
Yeah.
And it also happens in the S&P. And of course, what does it correspond to? It corresponds to the trading desk at the U.S. Fed. Okay, and I'll call it the market manipulators who are working hard to kill the canary in the coal mine.
Yeah, and the canary looks like it's been temporarily, at least, put out of its misery, but the canary will come back to life eventually, and the canary never lies, right?
Oh, that's what we're going through right now. We're going through a period where illusions are being shattered, and people were going to learn that you can't have something for nothing, and this crisis isn't over until virtually all of the developed world realizes you have to produce more than you consume. And, when we sit there and think about that, it's a frightening thing. Obviously, the welfare rolls and the food stamp rolls and everything, are just skyrocketing, and government dependency is skyrocketing as economic activity is imploding. And it's not going to cease, and it's not going to cease until those guys those able-bodied people are forced off the dole and made to take whatever job is necessary for them to eat.
Yeah, and there's another part of that equation, and it's what I would call the stealth dole, and that is all the government workers who are doing jobs that, I guess, government worker and productivity are kind of antithetical to one another. It's an oxymoron, productive government worker, but those people and the school system is larded with them, and every level of government is just packed with tons of dead wood. They're going to have to be shed too, aren't they, Ty?
Carrie, we're going to have to go back to producing wealth rather than consuming it. And like I said, the crisis isn't over until Mother Nature wins that war. And we can look at Greece and the Greek tragedy and all what's going on there. But the bottom line of it is that the Greeks are hardcore socialists, have been hardcore socialists for decades. They, just like the French, have pushed all of their really productive citizens outside the country. Just because there was no refuge from people that wanted to take the fruits of their labor from them. And those people, believe that they're entitled to consume more than they produce, and they believe that, and of course there's tens of millions of people like that here in the United States. And they're unfortunately Medicare recipients and Medicaid recipients, and people that have been told that you can have something for nothing. The payoff on Medicare, Carrie, is you put in $100, you get out $1,000.
Mm-hmm. That sounds good to me.
Well, it sounds good to anybody, but obviously it's not sustainable, and there's serial amputations ahead, and with Greece, that's what I'll call the something for nothing nation. But actually, the whole developed world is in one stage or another of that.
Yeah,
and it's just going to work itself up the chain.
Yeah.
One by one until the socialists let go of their grasp. It'll be all painted as a failure of capitalism, but it's a failure of central planning and socialism.
Yeah.
We really live in the land of George Orwell, where white is black and free markets are socialist markets, and it just goes on and on. But those illusions are going to be punctured, and they're being punctured every day, and they'll continue to be punctured until people wake up and get outside of that illusion and demand and learn how to get up in the morning and go to work and produce more than they consume. That's why the developing world is eating us for lunch, because there's no welfare over in China. There's no welfare in Thailand. There's no welfare in Vietnam. There's no welfare in Singapore. Mm-hmm. There's no welfare in India. Either you get up and you do something, or it could be you might have not too much food on your plate.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because I don't know, maybe it's the way you and I were raised, but the idea of sitting at home watching sitcoms or soap operas and not being productive, not feeding the family, taking care of our obligations, that to me is like a form of death. It's not physical death, but it's a mental death, because I think the human spirit requires you to be useful and productive in some capacity as much as you can be. And when you're not, or you're underutilized, you're not living up to your potential, it really leads you to really have a complete dissatisfaction with life, not just your economic well-being. I mean, wasn't that the way you were raised, Ty?
It was, but a lot of things are different from when I grew up. I was a Boy Scout, and we had the Scouts oath, and I'm a Christian, and we have the Ten Commandments, and we believe in hope and working hard and doing the right thing, and those things aren't taught. In fact, they used to be admired, and now they're despised. And why is that? Is because the government has substituted itself as God. It's substituted itself as our conscience. It's told us that we can exchange our freedom in exchange for security from it, and we'll be okay. And people have made those deals with the devil, but I don't think the devil's going to be able to keep his promise.
Yeah, well, when you put it that way, Ty, but I really feel that that especially among the younger people, I've seen a lot of them, and they seem to have a work ethic where their parents don't. I've seen it over and over and over again, and I'm hopeful in that regard that when there is the ultimate crash, and the crash is simply going to be reality asserting itself again and showing people that you can't live in a dream world, that it's produce or die, I think the younger generation is ready to pick up the slack. They're ready to cut the baby boomers off at the knees and say, we're not paying for your Medicare, we're not paying for your Social Security, and they're gonna throw us under the bus. I see that happening. It's an inevitability, and I don't blame them in the least, because if they're going to produce, why should they be saddled with generations of debt run up by the baby boomers and a whole poverty mentality? They need to break free of that, right?
Absolutely, Kerry. The obscenity of what Satan, the chosen one, is doing, hanging $1.3 trillion worth of debt around the necks of our children. The immorality that he's trying to pretend that he's doing the right thing, and creating all of these people that, are going to be dependent on him. Just think of somebody running a campaign saying, I am going to go and misuse the power of a government to take from one group and give to the other. Of course, they have their little sticky fingers on in between. Mm-hmm. And so, a dollar into the government, it may spit out a dime. But along the way, all the crony capitalists are fed. And, they were talking about Greece and how they never expected it to collapse as much as it did. And the reason that it's collapsed so much further, Kerry, is that they never realized how much of the private sector was dependent on the government for parts of their business.
And that's the essence of crony capitalism. That's the government picking winners and losers. It works for a while until it stops, and then when it stops, nobody can believe how bad things are. So, Ty, you're, let's say, a 40-year-old person. You got a couple of kids. You got savings of $5,000 to $25,000. You've managed to put it away. You have managed to keep it from the clutches of the government. What do? How do you protect yourself? How do you save your family?
Get it outside the monetary system and get it into your own possession. When you don't have only $5,000 to $25,000, it's not time to speculate. Mm-hmm. It's time just to preserve. And I said it in one of our previous ones, but you need to go out and buy yourself little silver and gold coins.
Yeah.
And don't keep it in a safety deposit box, because when the bank holidays happen, they're not going to let you have it.
Yeah, and I only bring it up again because people need to keep hearing the message, because it's so much against the paradigm and so much against the indoctrination that they've received in these indoctrination centers that some people call public schools and centers of learning. And you need to accept the fact. And when they say bank holiday, that doesn't mean a holiday for you to not pay what you owe the bank. That is a holiday for the bank where they don't pay you your money. And people need to understand that that could happen anytime. You could go pull into the gas station, stick your credit card into the swiper or your debit card, and guess what? You get an error message back, experiencing technical difficulties, fill up later, and then you're kind of left with the cash in your pocket. And that reality, that could happen relatively quickly if a black swan hits that we don't expect, because the system is so interconnected and so unknowable and uncontrollable that that who knows what could happen. It could set off a global catastrophe easily.
Well, I guess I'm not quite that sanguine. I would have to say that, we've had very clear printing press speeches from Bernanke, and actually we just had one last week from the head of the San Francisco Fed. Maybe I've got that quote right here. No, I don't. Mm-hmm. But he was very clear that they are stand ready. He's very supportive in getting printing money. Bernanke has said there'll never be another Lehman Brothers. He's, in speech after speech in the last 90 days, said one of his primary tasks isn't just unemployment and inflation, it's to ensure the financial system. And so, he's prepared to do whatever it takes, and of course that's a keystroke away.
Yeah,
and,
but a confidence-shattering event could happen. It's always what you don't expect. It's not what you do. And so, Ty, about your Trader View newsletter and your view for 2012, we're 2 months into it already. I published the first half that you sent me. Second half, what else can we expect?
Well, we're going to be touching on the bond market and IOUs in general, and I'm going to pierce any illusions anybody has that you can store wealth in paper. And I'm going to just say this very clearly. You need to learn how to weave the indirect exchange throughout your portfolio. For you people out there with the bigger portfolios, it's the greatest opportunity in history. But the key is, how do you preserve your wealth until you get to the best buying opportunity in stocks in history, or in real estate, or how do you make money when markets go down? How do you repair your money? Carrie, one of these times I'd like us just to have a brief blurb on what is money, and explain it to people, because you'll be shocked.
Yeah,
money is what the money is has never been taught to people, because actually that's the medium they use to prey upon the public.
Right, absolutely. And we could go back to that old Rothschild quote, which we've repeated ad infinitum on the show, but it's so true. So, Ty, where do we find you again on your site and your newsletter?
I'm at www.traderview.com. I'm having a new website open up in the next 2 weeks called tedbits.com. Tedbits is my commentary. TraderView is what I do. And just for your listeners, I'd like to tell them briefly, I am an absolute return alternative investment specialist. But what's that mean? That means I'll show you how to fix your paper and restore the functions of money. And I'll show you how to diversify your portfolio to make money in up and down and sideways markets. Or I'll call it the potential to. But I'm very good at understanding what's going on and putting together investments that can set their sails correctly. No, you're going to be challenged like you've never been before, group, and that's why we're all talking to each other, so that we can, prepare for the worst and hope for the best.
Yep, and something I always believe in doing is being forewarned is forearmed. And there's still time to really protect yourself and to profit from it, but at least to not go down with the ship. That's really the key. Don't go down with the ship. So, Ty, hey, thanks for being on again this week, and we'll talk to you next week and get a clearer picture. We'll talk about what money is and what you need to do to not get taken.
And I'll have the second part of my newsletter ready by that time as well.
Excellent. All right. We'll talk to you then.
Thank you, Kerry.